Eli Mercer was 12 years old when his mother stood at the front door with a suitcase and a smile that felt rehearsed. The morning light spilled through the narrow hallway, catching dust in the air and making everything look softer than it was. Eli stood barefoot on the cool tile floor, staring at the wheels of the suitcase as if they might suddenly explain what was happening. His backpack lay slumped against the wall, half unzipped, school papers still inside from the week before. He hadn't moved since she told him to come to the door. She crouched slightly and pressed something into his palm. Eli felt paper. Thin. Folded. Warm from her hand. "You're mature enough now," she said brightly. "Independent." Eli looked down and slowly unfolded the bill. $75. It felt heavier than it should have, not because of its value, but because of what it was supposed to mean. He waited for her to say more. To explain. To laugh and say she was joking. To tell him who was coming over later. But she didn't. Instead, she straightened, kissed the air near his cheek, and reached for the suitcase handle. "I'll be back before you know it," she added, already turning toward the driveway. "Mom," Eli said, his voice cracking around the word. She waved without looking back. The door shut with a soft, final click. Before this story continues, please like, comment, and subscribe, and tell us where you're watching from. Stories like this only reach the people who need them when they're shared. Someone listening right now may recognize themselves in what you're about to hear. Eli stood frozen long after the sound of the car faded. The house felt too quiet, like it was holding its breath. He stared at the door, half expecting it to open again, half terrified that it wouldn't. When nothing happened, he whispered the words he thought he was supposed to say. "I'll be fine." The sentence sounded weak in the empty space. His hands began to shake, so he stuffed the money into his pocket and walked into the kitchen, needing something solid to focus on. Something normal. He opened the fridge, then closed it, then opened it again like the contents might change if he tried hard enough. They didn't. A nearly empty carton of milk. A few slices of cheese wrapped in plastic. A container of leftovers with no label. He opened the pantry next, heart sinking with every shelf. 2 cans of soup. A half-used box of pasta. A jar of peanut butter scraped so thin you could see glass through it. "Independent," Eli muttered, the word tasting bitter now. He pulled out the pasta and soup, lined them neatly on the counter, and tried to feel capable. Grown. In control. He made a peanut butter sandwich instead, slicing the bread carefully like he'd watched his mom do, pretending this was a choice and not a limitation. He ate slowly at the table, counting bites, stretching each one like it mattered. By afternoon, the house felt different. Not just quiet, but empty in a way that pressed against his chest. Every sound he made felt too loud. Every moment of silence felt like proof that no one was checking in. No babysitter arrived. No neighbor knocked. No phone buzzed. Just Eli. $75. And the growing realization that this wasn't a test. That first night, he slept with the lights on. The house creaked in ways he'd never noticed before. Pipes knocked. The wind rattled the windows. His phone sat on the nightstand, screen dark and accusing. He checked it over and over, even though he knew there would be nothing there. No missed calls. No messages. By morning, hunger had sharpened his thoughts into something restless. He poured cereal into a bowl, then poured it back when he realized how little was left. He ate it dry, sitting on the floor because the table felt too official for a meal that small. He tried to distract himself with schoolwork, then with television, then with cleaning the kitchen even though it was already clean. Time moved strangely. Too fast and too slow all at once. On the second day, he tried to use the credit card his mom had left on the counter. It declined. Twice. He stared at the screen, heat crawling up his neck, before slipping it back into place like it had offended him. "She said it would work," he whispered. By the third day, hunger became physical. His head felt light. Standing up too quickly made his vision blur. He opened the pantry again, knowing exactly what he'd find, and still feeling disappointed when it was the same. He found an old notebook in his backpack, one he'd used for doodles and unfinished homework. He opened to the first page, stared at the blank paper for a long moment, then wrote one word at the top in careful block letters. Record. Under it, he listed everything he could think of. No adult supervision. No food plan. Card doesn't work. No calls. His handwriting grew tighter with each line. That night, he recorded a short video on his phone, holding it steady with both hands. "This is day 3, he said quietly. "I'm still alone. I don't know when they're coming back." He didn't cry. Not yet. On day 5, the cereal ran out. Eli sat on the kitchen floor with the empty box beside him, staring at the crumbs like they might apologize. The joke he'd been telling himself, that this was temporary, that it would all make sense later, stopped being funny. "This is ridiculous," he whispered, his voice breaking. He added more notes to the notebook. Still no calls. Still alone. His anger crept in slowly, replacing fear like a shield. "If they think I'm old enough to survive alone," he muttered, "then I'm old enough to show someone what they did." That was when the knock came. 3 firm raps at the door that froze him in place. When Eli cracked the door open, he saw Mr. Calder, the school counselor, standing on the porch with concern written all over his face. "Hi, Eli," he said gently. "I've been trying to reach your parents." Eli swallowed. "They're traveling," he whispered. "Can I come in?" Eli stepped aside. Mr. Calder's eyes moved quickly through the quiet house, lingering on the empty counters, the bare fruit bowl, the stillness. "Where are your parents?" he asked. "Lisbon," Eli replied. "For a month." Mr. Calder's expression tightened. "And who's staying with you?" "No one," Eli said. "They said I was ready." The silence after that felt heavier than any hunger. "How long have you been alone?" Mr. Calder asked. "Almost a week." Mr. Calder pulled out a chair and sat down, lowering himself to Eli's level. "Do you have enough food?" he asked. Eli reached into his pocket and placed the folded bills on the table. "This is what they left." Mr. Calder exhaled slowly. "Eli, this is neglect." The word echoed in Eli's head, sharp and unfamiliar. "So, there are consequences?" Eli asked quietly. Mr. Calder nodded. "Yes. And you didn't cause them." Something in Eli loosened at that. Mr. Calder made a call from the hallway. Eli heard fragments of conversation. 12 years old, no guardian, no food. Soon after, the front door opened again and Mrs. Rowan, the neighbor, stepped inside, her face pale. "Oh, sweetheart," she whispered. "Why didn't you come to me?" Eli's voice cracked. "I didn't want to be weak." Mrs. Rowan knelt beside him. "Surviving isn't weakness," she said softly. When the caseworker arrived, she moved carefully through the house, opening cabinets, checking the fridge, taking notes without judgment. "You won't be staying alone tonight," she said gently. Relief hit Eli so hard his chest hurt. Before leaving, he recorded one last video of the empty kitchen. "This is what it looked like," he whispered. "This is what they left." Crossing the lawn to Mrs. Rowan's house felt like stepping into another life. Warm smells drifted from her kitchen. Garlic. Bread. Real food. Eli's stomach growled loudly. She pretended not to hear. "You cook with me tonight," she said. "No one eats alone here." For the first time in days, Eli felt something other than fear. He felt safe. Eli Mercer woke the next morning in a bed that wasn't his, staring at a ceiling fan that turned slowly, quietly, as if it understood the need for calm. For a moment, confusion washed over him. The smell of clean sheets, the faint sound of birds outside the window, the absence of dread pressing on his chest. It all felt unfamiliar. Then memory returned, gently but firmly, like a tide rolling back in. Mrs. Rowan's house. Safety. The word still felt strange in his mind, like a language he hadn't spoken in a long time. He sat up slowly, half expecting to feel the same dizziness that had followed him for days, but it wasn't there. His stomach still felt hollow, but not sharp with pain. Not desperate. The difference mattered more than he could explain. Downstairs, he heard soft movement. The clink of a mug against a countertop. A radio playing low, something warm and old-fashioned. Eli hesitated at the top of the stairs, suddenly unsure of his place again. In his own house, he'd learned to move quietly, so as not to disturb anyone. Here, the quiet felt different. Inviting, not threatening. Mrs. Rowan looked up when she saw him. "Good morning," she said, smiling gently. "I hope you slept okay." Eli nodded. "Yes, ma'am." She placed a plate on the table. Scrambled eggs. Toast. A banana. Nothing extravagant, but it felt like abundance. Eli sat down slowly, unsure if he should ask permission. "Go ahead," she said softly. "Eat." He didn't rush. He didn't need to anymore. Later that morning, Ms. Hartley, the caseworker, returned. She brought a folder this time. Thick. Organized. Official. Eli watched as she set it down on the kitchen table, the weight of it landing with a soft thud that somehow felt loud. "Eli," she said gently, pulling out a chair. "I want to explain what's happening, so nothing feels confusing or scary." He nodded, gripping his notebook in his lap. The one that used to be for doodles. the one that now carried the word record on its first page like armor. You did the right thing, Ms. Hartley continued. You didn't cause this situation. Adults are responsible for making sure children are safe. That responsibility doesn't disappear because they want time away. Eli swallowed. They said I was ready. Ms. Hartley met his eyes. Being capable doesn't mean being disposable. The sentence lodged itself deep inside him. She asked questions next. Careful ones. How long his parents had been gone. What instructions they'd left. Whether anyone checked on him. Eli answered honestly, his voice quiet but steady. Each answer seemed to make the room heavier, not because he was exaggerating, but because he wasn't. When he showed her the notebook, she took it with both hands, treating it like something fragile and important. This helps, she said. It protects you. That afternoon, Mr. Calder visited again, bringing grocery bags and a seriousness that hadn't been there before. Keep the receipts, he told Mrs. Rowan. They matter. Eli watched as shelves filled. Pasta, bread, fruit, milk, real food, evidence of what hadn't been there before. He slipped the receipts carefully into his notebook, behind the pages already filled with notes and lists. Something shifted in him then. The notebook wasn't just a record anymore. It was proof that his experience mattered, that someone believed him. That evening, after dinner, Eli overheard voices in the living room. Words floated through the hallway. Temporary placement. Risk factors. Supervised contact. He didn't understand every phrase, but he understood the tone. Something serious was happening. Something that couldn't be undone by pretending everything was fine. Later, alone in the guest room, Eli recorded another video. Day 7, he whispered. I'm not alone anymore. People know. He paused, then added quietly. If my parents ever see this, this is why. The next evening, his phone rang. His mother's work number flashed across the screen. Eli froze. Mrs. Rowan was beside him instantly. You don't have to answer alone, she said. He put the phone on speaker and pressed accept. What did you do? His mother snapped before he could say hello. Why is Child Services emailing us? Do you know what this looks like? Not are you okay? Not are you safe? Eli felt something inside him harden. They're involved because you left me, he said quietly. You left me with $75 and no food. You're exaggerating, she shot back. There was food. And you're 12, not a baby. Mrs. Rowan leaned forward. This is Mrs. Rowan, she said firmly. Your son was dizzy from hunger. I bought groceries because your house was nearly empty. Silence. Then, sharp and defensive. Why are you interfering? This is a family issue. Eli looked down at his notebook. No calls for 7 days, he said softly. I wasn't fine. The call ended abruptly. Mrs. Rowan silenced the phone. There will be consequences, she said gently. But not just for you. The next morning, Ms. Hartley met Eli at school. Kids moved around them, laughing, unaware that his life had shifted beneath his feet. Your parents changed their flight, she said. They'll be home in 3 days. Eli's stomach tightened. They're not coming back because they miss me, he said quietly. Ms. Hartley didn't disagree. They're coming back because they're afraid. For the next 2 days, preparations were made. Copies of call logs. Photos of the empty fridge. Screenshots of the declined card. His videos. His notebook. This isn't about revenge, Ms. Hartley reminded him gently. It's about safety. Eli nodded, though another word echoed louder in his mind. Justice. On the morning his parents returned, the house felt colder than he remembered. Dust hung in the air. The smell of abandonment hadn't faded. The folder sat on the table. His notebook lay open beside it. His phone rested on top, paused on the first video. Outside, car doors slammed. Laughter. Suitcases rolling. Eli took a slow breath. I want them to see everything, he whispered. The door opened. His mother walked in first, sunglasses perched on her head like she'd stepped off a magazine cover. His father followed mid-laugh, until he saw the people gathered in the kitchen. What is this? His mother demanded. Ms. Hartley stood. Please sit. Eli lifted his chin. I told them the truth, he said. His father tried to smile. There's been a misunderstanding. He's very mature. We left money. A card. Ms. Hartley slid documents across the table. The card was never activated. Photos followed. Empty shelves. Receipts dated after intervention. You trusted me to survive, Eli said quietly. But you didn't check if I was. When the video played, his own tired voice filled the room. Day 3. I'm still alone. His mother covered her mouth. His father's shoulders sagged. "This meets the legal definition of neglect," Ms. Hartley said calmly. His mother collapsed into a chair. "You can't do this," she sobbed. "We just needed a break." Eli stepped forward. "You needed a break more than I needed you," he said softly. Silence followed. When it was over, the decision was clear. Temporary placement with Mrs. Rowan. Supervised visits only. As his parents left, talking about lawyers and misunderstandings, Eli felt something settle inside him. Not triumph. Truth. Walking back across the lawn, Mrs. Rowan placed a hand on his back. "You were brave." Eli nodded. "I just stopped lying for them." Weeks later, he sat in a courtroom, telling his story without apology. The judge listened. The ruling came down. Supervised contact. Mandatory counseling. No unsupervised custody. His parents didn't go to jail. But they lost something else. The assumption that love was enough without responsibility. That summer, Eli learned how to cook. How to ask for help. How to trust adults who showed up. One night, he wrote in his notebook, "I am not invisible here," and underlined it twice. For the first time, he believed it. The courtroom smelled like paper, polish, and something faintly metallic, as if too many difficult truths had passed through the air and never fully left. Eli Mercer sat on the wooden bench beside Mrs. Rowan, his feet barely touching the floor, hands folded so tightly in his lap that his fingers ached. He had been inside the building for less than 10 minutes, and already it felt heavier than any place he had ever been. Across the room, his parents sat together, but not close. His mother kept adjusting the sleeve of her blouse, smoothing it down again and again, as if she could iron out what had happened simply by refusing to look rumpled. His father stared straight ahead, jaw clenched, eyes hollow. They looked smaller here. Less certain. Less in control. Eli noticed that before anything else. When his name was called, his chest tightened. Mrs. Rowan gave his hand a gentle squeeze before letting go. He stood slowly, feeling every eye in the room settle on him. For a moment, the old instinct returned, the one that told him to minimize himself, to soften the truth so others would feel more comfortable. But something had changed. He walked forward anyway. The judge's voice was calm, steady, not unkind. "Eli, we're going to ask you a few questions. You're not in trouble. You're here because your voice matters." That sentence landed deep. Eli took a breath and began. He spoke about the suitcase, the money, the silence. He talked about opening the fridge again and again like it might magically refill. About eating dry cereal and feeling dizzy. About the credit card that never worked. About nights spent listening to the house creak and wondering if something bad happened, whether anyone would even notice. His voice shook at first, then steadied. "I didn't want to get anyone in trouble," he said quietly. "I just didn't want to be alone anymore." No one interrupted him. When he finished, the courtroom was silent in a way that felt respectful, not empty. The judge nodded slowly, made notes, and thanked him for his honesty. Eli returned to his seat, heart pounding, but lighter somehow, as if telling the truth had removed something heavy he'd been carrying for years. The ruling came shortly after. Supervised visitation only. Mandatory parenting counseling. No unsupervised custody until further review. The words were formal, legal, precise. But what they meant was simple. Adults were finally holding other adults accountable. Eli's parents didn't cry in court. His mother pressed her lips together tightly, eyes shining but unreadable. His father rubbed his face with both hands and nodded once sharply, as if acknowledging a loss he couldn't undo. When it was over, they filed out quietly, not meeting Eli's eyes. He didn't chase them. Life at Mrs. Rowan's house settled into a rhythm that felt unfamiliar at first, then comforting. Breakfasts happened at the table, not rushed or skipped. Dinners were warm and shared. Someone always asked how his day was, and waited for the answer. Eli learned small things he'd never been taught before. How to boil pasta without overcooking it. How to fold towels so they fit neatly in the cabinet. How to say, "I need help," without feeling like the world would collapse. He still carried his notebook everywhere, though the word record on the first page no longer felt sharp. It felt protective, like a witness that would never forget for him. One evening, while watering the small garden behind the house, he asked Mrs. Rowan a question he'd been holding inside for weeks. "Do you think they'll change?" Mrs. Rowan set the watering can down slowly. "Change is possible," she said, "but only if they're willing to see what they did without excuses." Eli nodded. "I don't want to hate them." She looked at him with gentle certainty. "Not wanting to hate someone doesn't mean you let them hurt you again." That distinction mattered. The first supervised visit happened in a quiet room with soft chairs and a neutral smell. A counselor sat nearby, not intrusive but present. Eli's parents arrived early, standing awkwardly until he walked in. His mother rushed forward first. "Eli," she said, voice breaking. "We're so sorry. We didn't understand how serious it was." His father nodded quickly. "We thought you were mature enough. We didn't think you'd struggle." Eli listened. He didn't interrupt. He didn't comfort them either. "I needed you," he said calmly. "But you needed a break more." The room went still. His mother covered her mouth. "We were wrong," she whispered. "We see that now." The counselor leaned in gently. "What does being ready mean to you now?" she asked them. His father hesitated. "It means checking in. Making sure. Not assuming." Eli met his eyes. "It means not disappearing." They nodded, both of them, slowly. The visit ended with quiet instructions and clear boundaries. No promises of instant forgiveness. No shortcuts. Just steps. When Eli walked out, his chest felt tight, not from fear this time, but from grief. Grief for the parents he thought he had. Grief for the childhood that had ended too early. Mrs. Rowan was waiting in the hallway. "You did well," she said. "I'm tired," Eli replied honestly. "That's okay," she said. "Healing is exhausting." School staff checked in often. Mr. Calder met him during lunch one day, sitting across from him with the same steady presence he'd shown since the beginning. "How are you holding up?" he asked. Eli shrugged. "Better. Still weird." Mr. Calder smiled slightly. "That makes sense. You're between what was and what's becoming." "Is that normal?" Eli asked. "Very," he replied. "Family isn't just who you're born to. It's who shows up when it matters." Eli thought about that later, lying awake in the guest room. He remembered the nights no one checked on him. The days when hunger felt like fog. The silence that swallowed entire hours. And then he remembered Mrs. Rowan knocking softly before bedtime. Mr. Calder showing up without being asked. Ms. Hartley calling to make sure he was okay. Someone had shown up. That mattered. As summer deepened, Eli's notebook began to change. The lists grew shorter. The notes became reflections instead of evidence. One night, he wrote, "I am not invisible here." He underlined it twice. Mrs. Rowan found the page later and hugged him without saying a word. During another supervised visit, his mother brought a small wrapped box. "I know this doesn't fix everything," she said carefully, "but I want you to know I'm trying." Inside was a new journal, his name printed neatly on the cover. "We're learning in counseling," she added. "How to check in. How to listen." Eli ran his fingers over the cover. "I don't know when things will feel normal," he said. His father nodded. "We understand. We're ready to earn it. No shortcuts this time." One evening, Eli sat on the porch with Mrs. Rowan, watching the sky turn orange and gold. The street was quiet, peaceful. "Thinking big thoughts?" she asked, handing him a glass of lemonade. He smiled faintly. "Just grateful." "For what?" "For the people who didn't leave." She nodded, satisfied. As summer ended, Eli placed his old notebook in a drawer. The word record no longer felt like armor. It felt like history. He picked up the new journal and opened to the first page. This time, he didn't write about what was missing. He wrote about what stayed. He wasn't alone anymore. And for the first time, that felt completely real. If this story moved you, please like, comment, and subscribe, and tell us where you're watching from. Sharing stories like this helps them reach the people who need to hear them most. And someone